Hello everyone. Today I'm meeting with Susan Emmett, Social Value Director at multidisciplinary consultancy Stantec. She's going to be sharing with me how an eclectic career path can allow you to gather up a wide range of unique and valuable skills, how it's often informed by a golden thread of talents and interests that stretch way, way back, and why every great business should have social value at its heart. I hope you enjoy the discussion as much as I did.
You'll spend 80,000 hours at work. You're here because you want those hours to count. Hi, I'm Zoe Schofield.
And I'm Erica Sosner. A warm welcome to the Career Equation podcast. On this podcast, we take time out from our award-winning careers consultancy to share a game-changing formula to help you solve the sum of your life.
Each week, we and our guests use the career equation to explore their story so far and help them unlock the secrets of a fulfilling career.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Career Equation podcast. Today, I'm really happy and excited to be spending some time alongside Susan Emmett, who I've known now for a good decade or so and watched her career trajectory evolve over that time. Currently, Susan is Social Value Director at the multidisciplinary consultancy Stantec. She's here to share with us all about what that means, what that looks and feels like, and what the next trajectory of growth and evolution for both her and Stantec might be in that space. So a really warm welcome, Susan. It's lovely to have you today.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me, Erica. And it's great to catch up as well. It's been quite a while.
Let's start with a start of a 10 question for the listeners, which is, what does social value actually mean?
Really big question, Erica, but a massively important one because it means all manner of things. So the way I like to look at it is the value an organization adds to society and community beyond their stated profit. So it's quite broad, it's multifaceted, it can apply to a number of things. But I think the premise is it's not just about making money, it's what is the impact of what you do on people, on the environment, on communities, etc.
So I'm very interested in the labelling of things, beneficial activities that organisations are engaged with that we previously might have called social responsibility or community outreach, or perhaps the pro bono aspect of your work. It's the environmental, the social impact. And I'm guessing that social value is about bringing all of that together, all those things under one umbrella that we're going to recognise and hear more and more about in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's spot on, Erica. In fact, social value as a term has been around since 2012 with the Social Value Act, but it has evolved from other things. It's part of ESG. You mentioned CSR, which is something that evolved in the 1950s that has been around for many decades. This is more about embedding it in businesses. So it's not something that you do in addition to separately. It's about making it part of everything a business does and also how it does it. It's not just what you do, it's also how you behave and work with your colleagues, work with your clients or customers, and your supply chain as well. That's a really important part.
I briefly spent some time around the CSR agenda, and I noticed that a decade or so ago could often be about mitigating against some of the things that we were doing, rather than thinking, how do I really integrate our thinking, working alongside communities, clients, the environment, and all the other things that are valuable and important to us in the world. So it feels like it's a really exciting step change for organisations to be thinking about this in a much more holistic way, about the opportunities that they bring and the role that they can play in society.
It is an exciting place to be right now because there's a lot going on, actually, both in terms of new legislation, but also in the requirements from the investment community, but also public opinion. That's a massive driver. I think people rightly expect more from businesses, and it's an important part of our reputation, actually, to deliver social value.
And we're going to be exploring this much more deeply in the question that you're asking today. But I feel like giving that zoom out in relation to public opinion might be an interesting way to jump into your career, because in a variety of ways, you've been exploring and working with the public's opinion over your career history, really. Would you mind giving us a potted sense of the 2 or 3 key moments to just elaborate on that idea for me?
No, thank you for bringing that up. And it shows you know me quite well. In a way, actually, I've been building up to this role all my life because it allows me to make use of all the different skill sets I've picked along the way. I've had a really diverse career, quite eclectic, actually. I've had more than one career, to be honest. My first career was in journalism. I started off as a financial reporter at the Times newspaper, then moved on and became property deputy editor and also edited the supplement for a little while. So that, I suppose, until recently was like the bulk of my career, but things are beginning to shift as I get older. I left journalism in 2012 and became much more focused on the property world. I was a researcher for many years, looking at data and markets. I also then went on and worked for Homes England.
Just note the level of joy in Susan's voice as she talks about these things from way back when, and not so far away, that really matter and energise her. So often in the workplace, it's uncomfortable to associate emotion with the work that you do. But over and over again, I see that when people really get pleasure and energy and enthusiasm from the work that they do, that is literally the equation in action. Skills plus a huge amount of pleasure and enthusiasm, because you're delivering a result that you think is meaningful. Reflect back on the times in your working life and outside your professional life that give you huge amounts of energy when you think about them. These can be levers for real success.
So I have some experience of working for a government agency and the civil service and all of that. And now I'm at Stantec, which is a consultancy, but the role is quite broad, quite diverse, and enables me to draw on all those component parts in order to actually deliver my job on a daily basis.
Brilliant. And I feel like there's something so interesting that happens around the kind of weaving of our previous career history. You said, I prepared all my life for this amazing opportunity. And sometimes when we've had an eclectic career, we can be a bit harsh on ourselves. Is this linear enough? Maybe I wasn't as structured as I could have been, all of that. But I feel like you're a wonderful demonstration of the richness of the tapestry that you build up when you do explore how to use your skills from different places and spaces and discover that later in life, that's actually what you've been preparing for an opportunity that otherwise would have been difficult in terms of the multidisciplinary requirements of what you're going to be up to.
Yeah, my job wouldn't have existed when I was at school or even at university. It just didn't exist. It has evolved over the years and it's become much more of a thing more recently in the last decade or so. I think for me as well, that another important point to make here is that I saw an opportunity. I've been working at Stantec for a number of years, actually. So this role is new to the company, but I'd been Stantec for about 3 years, a bit longer than that, actually, in a number of roles, including business development and account management. So I knew what clients were asking for and what they needed. And this came out of that. So it came out of seeing a business need and an opportunity and working with people, and the role was created. There were formal interviews and what have you. And I started at the beginning of the year. But it's about also positioning yourself into where you think you might like to go and being really aware of where the world is going, where the markets are going, what the demand is, and being able to then draw on your background to match those changes.
Yes. That's valuable advice for anyone within an organisation, spotting opportunities to be beneficial to that organisation, to the clients and the individual can really be a win-win. You can create something tailor-made for both you and for real business impact. So it'd be really exciting to see what happens as these years roll by and this new framework around social value. So tell us, what's the conundrum, what's the question, the opportunity that's brought you into this conversation today? And what would you like to leave with some insights around that would be valuable for what you're trying to accomplish?
So since starting this role, I've had a number of conversations with people doing similar things in similar companies. We all have the similar challenges, which is about defining social value and embedding changes needed in big companies in order to turn social value into business as usual, which I think is pretty much everybody's aims. I've done a lot of work drawing on my skills as an interviewer, as a journalist, as a communicator in order to drive that. But is there anything more I can be doing in order to bring people together and coordinate that collective sense of purpose?
And is your ideal vision that the social value becomes integral to the way that a business runs and the way that it thinks about what it does, and to almost see Stantec really as leading the charge about how to do that exceptionally well?
Absolutely think so. To be fair, we do a number of things really well already. I think what we haven't done so well historically, and hence this was my pitch to the business, is we're not so good at telling the story. So there are
Mm.
amazing people across the business doing amazing things, but it tends to sit in their silos and it's known within a certain area. But what I'm trying to do is probably aggregate that and elevate that and also make it more obvious to our clients, to our stakeholders, investors, you name it. So, yes, it's uncovering what is there, really, because I think there's a lot of good work that has been going on for a very long time that we need to be shouting about a bit more.
Fabulous. And I know many of the best organisations are way too modest about blowing their own trumpet and telling the stories of the beneficial impacts that they are having. So having an exciting opportunity, a great chance for us to draw out and reflect on some of your career story in a way that really might help you to bring that to the fore. And what else can I bring to really make this happen? Make this be all it can be? We're going to use the equation formula to do that. So for those who are listening for the first time, I'll just give a quick recap on that and then we'll dive into Susan's stories and history. So what the equation says is that when we're thriving at work, there are 4 components in play. And the more that we can understand what those components look and feel like for us, the more we can leverage them to do remarkable things in the world. The first is to learn to play to our strengths and use our natural skills and abilities to the max. The second is to apply that to things that enthuse us, things that we're excited and energized about. We call that passion. And then to create a result, an impact that is meaningful for our organisation, that has an impact that really matters. And lastly, the fourth is that on the back of that, to be able to then say, well, what kind of environment will support me to really do my best work in relation to this? What are the things that I need to be mindful of that support or hinder me from really leveraging these skills, these passions, and getting this impact? So the equation is really about drilling into that and getting really specific about the criteria and the design of you as a person in order to really create all that you can in the world. And without further ado, let us dive into your first story. And the first story that I asked people to tell me about is a time when you were relatively young, when you discovered that you had a natural gift or strength for something.
Yeah, this is a lovely question, actually, but I had to think quite hard about it because it just seems like such a long time ago now. But the story I wanted to tell is about theatre. I've always loved the theatre from a very young age. It's a magical place for me, but I'm not very good at acting. In fact, I'm a rather rubbish actress, but I do love producing and directing. And I have 2 younger sisters who were always very willing cast members and a very devoted mother who would always watch whatever performance we chose to put on. There was one particular family holiday where we had aunts, uncles, cousin, quite a lot of people assembled. And we put on a production of a play that I wrote called The Poor Girl Who Was Abandoned in the Snow. I was about 8 at the time. And I got my cousins roped in and my sisters, and we raided my cousin's wardrobe, etc., and put on this amazing performance that went on for hours. And people still talk about it now, which is like really odd. It's become almost like a family meme that people refer to. So such was the impact. But for me, what that showed me, and I think this is very much in hindsight because this was seriously not apparent at the time, but that I enjoy and have some success at bringing people together to deliver a thing. In this case, it was a play, but I think there are other examples in my career where you can apply it to other things. So I quite liked that kind of bringing people together, that coordinating, but also the creativity involved. You're making something new that wasn't there before. Hopefully that answers your question.
This is a delightful story. I love this picture of you bossing and directing and evolving and using so many different skills, of course, all of those skills that are involved in putting on any kind of production, really, whether the caliber, the age group. Let's just drill down a little bit then, because you said, I recognise this characteristic happening again and again in my work. And I think that's something that's interesting to explore in a little more detail. So what were the kinds of skill sets? And do you think when you look back at that origin story, but you also see it carried through, that it made it possible for you to lead, to bring other people along, to tell a story and to manage quite a complex set of inputs as well?
I think it's having the idea in the first place. It's having a vision for a thing. In this case, it was theatre. It was a story. It was very much a fairy tale. There wasn't an existing established fairy tale. It was one we made up. Can't remember the origins of this, But my little sister was about 2 at the time. She was a baby. So we needed some kind of story that could involve a non-speaking star. So I can't remember the plot, but I do remember wrapping her up in many clothes and she got carted around like a parcel. And she was very much the star of the show, but her role was to look desperate and adorable, and everybody else had to come and rescue her. So it was having that idea, but then persuading people that it's something they want to do. It was allocating roles because everybody had a part to play. It was also, I had to persuade my older cousin, who was almost a teenager, to let us raid her makeup. So I suppose, yeah, persuading people, galvanizing action, making the aunties and uncles sit down to watch it, and obviously then, yeah, and enjoy the applause. So I think that's probably what we did at the time. And it was also the group activity. We did it. There were about 6 of us. It's how we played all the time. So it was just a fun thing to do as well. I just enjoyed it.
Yes, it does sound tremendously good fun. And I like the innovation around the resourcing, which I bet has also been useful over the years. You know, what can we dig out of various broom cupboards and budgets to make something exciting happen? So tell me a little bit about this sense of connectivity and collectivity and the joy I hear in bringing people together to do something, working alongside them, but then also sharing that with a wider audience. Has that been something that you consider as a kind of natural aptitude of yours?
I guess so. I like seeing the results. So the joy of doing something like putting on a play is that you can see their reaction in their faces as it in live time as you're doing it. So you get a lot of feedback from that, instant feedback, and being nice on aunts and uncles. They were always going to applaud, weren't they? But so I had a slightly captive audience and they were a bit biased. But it was also the sense that you're inventing a new thing. I quite like that. We weren't doing Snow White. It was a new play, new production. It involved everybody. So we could have just said to my baby sister, no, you can't play. But we included her and she was the star. And no speaking, or she was very much had her role. But it was that everybody had a thing that they did. And I remember it being a very joyful thing and very funny. I think the parents were in stitches. I can imagine why now. But at the time, I was I thought it was just brilliant. But yeah, it was just enjoyment, Erica. I think that's really the thing. As a child, that's how we played at home. We just invented stuff. Often games would go on for days on end. And this was a more sort of formalized version of that.
Yeah, there's just a lovely sense of warmth and conviviality there that I'm sure you brought along with you. They say that play is the most important way of learning when you're little. And that is one of the reasons why I start with this question, because I think it's not really inconsequential what you played, how you played, and the felt sense of what you got from it. It has a massive impact on what happens next in your life. And actually, that takes us nicely into question number 2, moment number 2, which is about pleasure and joy and warmth. And this question is, describe a moment in your career where you really loved what you were doing, and help us dig a little bit underneath about why that was.
Yes, okay. Very many years later, when I was at the Times, and I said at the beginning, started off as a financial reporter, and I spent about 4 years or so as a financial reporter before the opportunity came to become deputy property editor and launch a new supplement. So again, a new thing that had to be created that hadn't been done before. I had an amazing boss, really visionary, really great at drawing out people's skill sets. And I was involved from the beginning. So I do feel like there was quite a lot of input that I gave before the launch in terms of shaping it, its character, its objectives, and all of that stuff. So we had a small but perfectly formed team, and it was great because we had a picture editor and other commissioning editors and designers and writers. Lots of freelance writers were attached to us. So again, there was that sense of everyone together doing their thing, but together, and then producing, in this case, a weekly supplement at the end of it. And you have something tangible to show. But that is the efforts of a number of different skills. And I miss that, actually. That's probably what I love so much about that, was that it wasn't about hierarchy or who was the boss. It was, you are the picture person, all about pictures. What's the photo shoot going to be? And you write and you do this. And I could vaguely do most of those jobs, but I suppose my talent or my role was to pull that together and get it out of different people. So that's what I did. I feel very proud of what we achieved, and we won awards. It's still going now. Newspapers have changed quite a bit, actually. So the advertising model's different. But at the time, it was chunky and quite well known.
Yeah, I remember being a big fan of Bricks and Mortar. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful and informative and interesting, and one of the first places that I turned to in the magazine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I wonder as well, because doing something, on a regular basis, it's got an output, it's got a kind of drum rhythm in a way, in terms of helping you to get to a deadline. To what extent does that energize and excite you, or does it stress you out?
I think I've changed over the years, right? But certainly at the time, I probably wouldn't have been able to get out of bed if I didn't have a deadline. A lot of people are freaked out by deadlines. I quite like them because I find them quite liberating, because you need to deliver something by a certain date, and therefore you can only do as much as you can do between now and then. Whereas if you don't have a deadline, it goes on forever. The work never ends. You don't know how much or how little or what the optimum amount of effort you need to put in with. But with the deadline, that's really clear. Obviously, you had to keep a standard always, but you also knew that there are certain things that you weren't going to be able to achieve in a week, and therefore you had to very much cut your cloth to fit that scenario. And I was absolutely fine with that. I think later in life that changed because the nature of roles changed, but I set myself mini deadlines anyway because it helps to keep me motivated. Even sometimes I even write things on to-do lists that I've done so I can cross them off. It helps me to focus that by the end of the week, I do it every Monday. By the end of the week, I need to have done these things. Even if the
Yes.
project is 6 months long, I like that discipline. By the end of today, I would have done this by Wednesday, and it keeps me going. Because I think if I
Yes.
didn't have that, I would find it really hard to focus. So it's something that I've kept from that earlier training, even though it's not part of my life in quite the same way as it was. But yeah, having that particular exercise gave us is the sense of shared purpose. Everybody knew what they had to do by the end of the week. Yeah. There was no debate as to what is our objective. Our objective was create the supplement and send it to the printers. So that focused everybody's minds, and it meant that everybody was pretty much working in the same direction. And that can be a really energizing thing for me anyway. I find
Yes.
that really a great thing.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's some principle of organising by milestones that everyone can have clarity to sprint to, especially when it's something that's got a much longer term vision. You're trying to embed something into an organisation that's just not going to happen overnight. It's already doing great stuff, but the coordination of that, the thinking around that, that's a long term process. And being able to step back and say, so what's the sprint? Like, can we see how to get to that? Let's see the tangible results on that. That can be really exciting and a sort of useful way to keep momentum when something is mid or longer term. And sometimes also only by doing something do you get into clearer and sharper focus about what the next best thing is to do.
I agree. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about things that matter. I can already hear in your energy that you've done lots of things that have really had an impact and a good result. But tell me, is there anything particularly stand out in terms of moments where you thought, actually, what I'm up to, it really matters? And how do you measure that?
Yes, I suppose that the best illustration of doing something that really matters in a sort of the broader sense was an experience I had whilst I was working for Homes England. So I've been there a few years when COVID hit. And I think everyone has their own COVID story to tell, but most people would agree that it was a very unsettling time. There were many unknowns. There was a lot of confusion, etc. And for the agency, the first priority was clearly to keep everybody safe, which is absolutely right. But the second priority was to understand what was going on in the market and understand what was going on with the agency's partners, their stakeholders, and broader communities. And at the time, I was head of market engagement. So I was part of the group which formed very quickly, mobilized within 10 days, 2 weeks. We had a group that had created the tech, the methodology, all the systems and processes in order to do real-time market engagement across all the different sectors that the agency operates. And that's quite broad. That's like house builders, housing associations, local authorities, investors, to name but a few. So we had to make sure we were talking to all of these people, capturing that information, distilling it, analyzing it, and then writing weekly reports that went to the organization's board and as well as to MHCLG, the department that sponsors the agency, and number 10 as well. So it went all the way up. And that was incredible that we were able to create these outputs. It's a bit similar, actually, now talking to you is a bit like doing a weekly supplement, isn't it? But it was very much that rhythm. Actually, it's Friday, this thing has got to go out. And so you can measure it in terms of we produced this many reports, obviously, but also you can measure it in terms of feedback that we had from senior leaders and number 10 who found it really useful, because real data is a number of houses built. That's going to lag. Whereas this was in real time, understanding how different players in the market were thinking so that they could adjust government policy accordingly. So that was an incredibly powerful thing to have done. And in terms of making a difference, it's probably top of my list, really.
Brilliant. I know there was a colossal impact in terms of development and house building and the access to materials and safety. And it was a really dynamic environment in which a lot of things were changing and there were enormous economic repercussions. So I can really see how valuable that would have felt to be actively involved in that. And last but not least, let's talk about environment a bit. In this one, I ask you the other side of the coin, which is about environments that actually really didn't suit you or bring out the best in you. Can you pinpoint a moment, Susan, where you really realised you're in an environment that didn't suit you and what you needed instead?
I'll probably start by saying that environment was never something I considered, ever, when making any decisions. The first time it even crossed my mind to consider the importance of your work environment was working with you. So that was fairly late in my career, actually. So before that, any decision choices would be made around what is the role, what are the terms, what's the organization like in terms of what it does, etc., but not what are your days like to be in that. So yes, it's only looking back that I see this. At the time, it was very hard to see. But one of the places where I worked, in many ways, I loved the role. I got on with a number of great people who were very impressive. But in retrospect, it wasn't the right environment to me because it was very bonus driven and competitive, very male dominated and not very creative, not very collaborative, almost the opposite of all the things I've been talking about. It was just the culture. And I really struggled with that. But it wasn't like something I noticed straight away. I couldn't really think straight. So I suppose that was the moment where you think, oh, well, there's something not quite right here. Yes. I need to make a change. I didn't think it was the environment. I thought there was something wrong with me. I think, it's only looking back that I see things differently and perhaps would have made different choices. But nonetheless, it's not black and white. So there were lots of very good positive things that came out of that phase in my life as well. But I think I work better when I'm working in a more supportive, collaborative, diverse environment. And in all fairness, my current employment is exactly all of those things. So I think, now a much better fit.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Susan. I know it's not easy, and I know that it touches on things that are difficult. And I think for listeners, it's incredibly helpful, both in terms of when someone has perhaps a fairly stellar career trajectory, it's easy to assume that nothing difficult ever happened along the way. And also just from the perspective that everyone has their ups and downs, it's really helpful. But I think what it demonstrates so beautifully is it's about environment that really makes a difference. You can have a wonderful role with really interesting people and really interesting work to do. But whatever it is, whether it's the speed or the way that decisions are made, the way things are rewarded, the culture, it's just different strokes for different folks. And it's not that the culture was wrong or that you were wrong. But so often people don't have that sense that environment is important. And so they're full of blame for themselves about why couldn't I make this work? And how was I sort of like a self-doubt has crept in, about the amount of time it can take to really restore yourself from that. That can really be difficult when in fact it's just a mismatch, like any other dating experience, right? One person comes with one set of chemistry and one with another, and some of them fuse beautifully, and some take a little work and settle down, and some never the two shall meet. But it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong on either side. So I think it's helpful for people to be able, and leaders of organisations also to be able to think about in what ways is my culture empowering and exclusive to everybody, and what aspects might this be a bit of a Marmite environment. And that's also okay and good to know, so that you know now that you've got that fit. And you've certainly got the skill set, the background, the expertise to really leverage all of this. Culture is such an individual thing. It's like the flavourings that make or break a sauce. When you think about recruitment, really consider what is our environment like? What are our flavours and spices? And what things might we want to test or to share or to check that really work in terms of supporting people to be successful in our culture? And be willing to receive feedback about your business, about your team, and the ways in which your environment could be enhanced to become more engaging, more supportive, more enabling for everybody in it, and where those blind spots might be that we all have about how our culture might be inhibiting demonstrations and experiences of success. Let's see what we can do now to pick out your favourite highlights of what you shared today in a way that might allow us to weave some insights together for you. So, as you know, because a while ago you had a go at this, we're going to refresh it again. The equation starts with a very simple gap to fill in, which is your name. So I'm going to say your name, and you're going to say I.
Susan.
Brilliant. We'll use my skills in. So having heard all this, what are the 2 or 3 standouts here?
Collaborating, coordinating, driving forward.
My skills in collaborating, coordinating, and driving forward. Lovely. And my passion for, where are the pleasures?
Creativity, doing new things, transformation, and also working with people.
Creativity, doing new things, transformation, and people. Great. And now we're thinking about the impacts that matter. So what are the things that now are really the way that you're measuring valuable work?
To make sure that is a recognised leader in social value in terms of what I'm genuinely trying to do right now.
Great. And an environment that is, let's put some words down here, some colour.
Inclusive, collaborative, and fun.
Nice. Works best for me. Lovely. So I'm going to play it back now. Of course, it's a quick first draft, but let's see how it lands. So I, Susan, will use my skills in collaborating, coordinating, and driving forward, and my passion for creativity, doing new things, and transformation and people to enable Stantec to be a recognised leader in the field of social value. An environment that is inclusive, collaborative, and fun works best for me.
I think that's right.
Yeah, it sounds true.
Yeah, it does indeed.
And so if I were to ask, now you're listening back to that, what things do you want to pick out of the toolbox that you bring with you that you might be able to add to perhaps amplify the work that you're doing at the moment at Stantec?
Oh, goodness. I think probably the communication element. It's in an organisation like mine, which is quite sizable, you can't do it all by yourself. You really can't. So it's about talking to the right people at the right time and bringing people with you, actually, that in the end gets the job done rather than doing everything yourself because you simply can't. It's too mammoth and you're not going to transform anything. You won't leave a legacy. What I want to do is make sure that it's sustainable. Everything we create is sustainable, and I could disappear tomorrow. It would still run perfectly and it doesn't rely on me. So I think that's my ambition, is to make myself redundant, which is probably not something people should be saying. But I think if the machine is working, then actually you want to be able to pass on the baton to other people in due course. So I'm very conscious of that. I have spent quite a lot of time recently bringing people from different teams together at Stantec and discussing social value, but also discussing what elements of that they are doing or they need to deliver to clients or they can contribute. So it's making sure that we continue to build on that. We've got a number of things planned for the autumn, which includes lots of upskilling, lots of staff training. We're building internal websites with lots of information. So it's about consistent dialogue across teams that historically might not have really spoken to each other so much. It's that knowledge sharing as well, more broadly.
And it sounds as well like it's a wonderful way to bring people together around a shared sense of purpose, that they already have a strong sense of that within the organisation, but there's almost like a story arising and a clarity about the plot lines.
Very good. I think that's a really good way of looking at it and defining it, because people are doing great works, but what I'm looking to do is build a framework on which to hang all this fruit, and then you see the fuller picture. And it becomes greater than the sum of its parts, to coin a phrase. And that's where I want to take this.
And what would you say has been the most useful aspect of the discussion in terms of clarifying what you're up to and how you're going to get there?
To sort of hear that do have the skill sets to be able to get on with it and implement it. So that's quite good. And it's just reminding yourself that actually you've got what you need. You just need to, keep going. That's fairly energizing because it's tough, but it's important.
Tough, but important. I think that's a great way of describing the right sweet spot for really stretching ourselves in work. So thank you so much, Susan. And listen, one final little question before we go, which is a little message back to that innovative director and producer there at 8 years old. What, as an adult, would you now say to her about her future and the career that she's going to carve out?
I would say to her that over the next few years, a lot of people will call you the bossy older sister. You'll get that tag and it will annoy you and it will embarrass you, but embrace it, go with it. You're not bossy, you are leading. And these are two different things. You felt it's that change of language would be really important to see.
Yeah, it's so important for young women to know there can be different ways of labelling the same valuable skill set and behaviour. So thank you so much for being on today. It's been fantastic. And I assume LinkedIn is the best place for people to find you to continue the conversation. We'll make sure to share your details in the show notes. But thank you so much again. And do join us again soon for another episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Career Equation podcast.
Stay connected with us on socials for more career insights, behind-the-scenes moments, and updates on upcoming episodes. And if you'd like to work with us, visit the Career Equation website or click the links in the show notes.
Remember, the Career Equation isn't just a podcast, it's a journey towards unlocking your full potential, enjoying your life, and doing remarkable stuff.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success.
And don't forget to share your thoughts and feedback with us. Your input shapes the future of our show.
Until next time, keep solving those career equations and pursuing your path to success. This is Erica Sosna
And Zoe Schofield. Signing off.